It's your weekly dose of confessions. Coming up, a bit of this.
Really sold that, well done.
Do you think?
Yeah.
And some of this.
I used to dress like Nick Hayward.
You still do?
Do I? Okay, but occasionally I do.
This is a download from the BBC. To find out more, including our terms of use, go to bbc.co.uk/Radio 2.
Hello and welcome to another Confessions compilation. Are you sitting comfortably? Well, here it comes regardless. This week's concise collection of terrible tales include a ruined racket, a bad babysitter, a misleading memo, and shake his trousers. Here they are. So we have a dry time confession, and it's sort of vaguely Wimbledon-y. Kind of.
Really sold that, well done.
Do you think?
Yeah.
It mentions tennis. Dear Father Simon and the Most Caring Collective, I write some 35 years or so after my transgression against my parents. I can't quite remember the exact year, though I recall it was when I became aware that the Aston Villa knitted football kit that my mother had woven for my action man was in fact not the coolest looking thing, especially the all-in-one knitted socks and boots. That's a nice thing, I think. I think I would have been aged about 7. I was an only child, and although I had many friends, when the weather was poor, I was more than happy to play at home on my own rather than brave the elements to visit friends. It was on one of the many wet winter weekends that my transgression took place. I often had created assault courses, battlefields and so on for my action men in the various rooms of the house. I'd also recently been in trouble having broken my mum's much-admired bottle garden during one particularly epic battle against the Germans in the dining room. It was a particularly poorly aimed catapult attacking the German lines that smashed said bottle garden that put me on a final warning for my mischievous behaviour. As a young boy, these final warnings are often forgotten in the heat of battle, and whilst attempting to rescue prisoners from a prisoner of war camp across a mountain range, it was a rope slide from a shelf in the kitchen to the kitchen table, I accidentally caught the edge of one of the plates that were on display on the shelf. There were a small number of these plates, antique and of great value, but like the bottle garden, my mum loved her collection of antique plates. The said antique plate on the end of the shelf fell, and I could do nothing but see it fall and smash on the floor into many, many pieces. I was horrified, and I panicked. I recall hiding the broken plate and adjusting the rest of the plates so it appeared as though nothing was amiss. I tried to pluck up the courage to confess at the time, but just couldn't, as I knew I was on the final warning. Then, in a moment of madness, I decided to cover things up. I ran to the shed, when no one was looking, and found amongst all the stored items my father's tennis racket. Perfect, I thought. I took the shards of the plate and the tennis racket to the bottom of the garden, where there was a small development of new houses being built. I used the very best forehand passing shots that a young non-tennis playing boy could muster. I sent the pieces of plate flying to the four corners of the building site. Job done. No one would ever know. A particularly dangerous moment in this confession. On returning to the shed, I glanced at the racket and noticed the shards of the plate had actually damaged several strings, and splinters had started to appear on the frame. What had I been thinking? I was in a worse state than before. All I could do was place the racket in its home in the shed, knowing that it would not be looked at for several months. I had plenty of time to think of how to get out of this one. My mum noticed that there was something not quite right with the shelf straight away. I'm sure there was another plate, she claimed. I denied everything. My father, in his usual supportive way, suggested my mother was going balmy. How can a plate go missing? I supported my father's comments, of course, and time passed and I forgot about the racket. Well, the summer approached and Wimbledon was only days away. "Fetch my racket out of the shed, son." I don't know if he spoke like this, but it's a standard kind of fatherly voice. "Fetch my racket out of the shed, son. It's an important game tomorrow. Need to win that game if I've got any chance of a pay rise this year." My father's backhand pass cross-court was, he always told us, a thing of great beauty. My father had been invited by the big boss of the company to play in the annual match-up against the chief exec of a rival firm. It was a bit of a grudge match. The two bosses themselves weren't very good, but they always relied on the skills of their doubles partners. In this case, my dad. You know, that racket, the one in the shed, signed by Rod Laver.
What?
Tell us about Rod Laver, briefly.
Probably one of the greatest tennis players ever.
There you
Australian.
go. That's all you need. I won it at a juniors competition when I was a kid, and just a little bit of the magic can rub off on me tomorrow. It's going to be a great year for all of us. Well, my stomach did knots when I heard this. I fetched the racket, making sure the cover was fully zipped up so Dad couldn't see the damage. Good luck tomorrow, I said, feeling queasy. Later that evening, I discovered that my worst fears had come true. The first couple of games had been okay. Dad hadn't been involved too much. It was when he started his first service game that it all started to fall apart, literally. To break one string would be considered unlucky, but to have a ball pass through your racket altogether is something else. The whole middle section of the strings had disappeared. It was like a scene from Tom and Jerry. He had to finish the game using a borrowed badminton racket, which was pretty useless. Can you imagine playing tennis with a badminton racket? I knew the telling off of my life was coming, and I was sat at the dinner table, palms clammy, when Dad said, "I bet those damn moths got at it, little blighters." Or something to that effect. My mother was horrified that they may actually get into our house, and the shed became out of bounds until we were sure that they'd been eradicated, because if they could eat their way through tough strings, who knows where they could get? Anyway, I need your forgiveness, not for getting away with the final warning, having then go on to break my mother's plate and ruining my father's tennis racket. I seek forgiveness as my actions clearly brought my mum's sanity into question, which continues, I could tell you, to this day, and I denied her the opportunity of a brand new kitchen. But also I feel that by stopping my dad's tennis playing, I could well have robbed England of its own Bjorn Borg. I throw myself to your mercy. Mr. G, with tonight's confession. Sorry, I should have mentioned Mr. G slightly earlier. Mr. G confesses all. It's multi-layered.
I don't get the kitchen bit at the end. What's it got to do with the kitchen? The new kitchen?
It's a very good point.
Anyway, never mind
no
about
idea.
that. I thought this whole thing sounded very sophisticated for a 7-year-old. For a 7-year-old to plan and then go out and launch different bits of the plate in different directions.
But if you hit things with a tennis racket,
oh, absolutely. I just think it was an incredibly, grown-up thing for him to have done, actually. But I also thought, even though the tennis racket fell apart during this vital game, you can restring it. It's still going to have the signature on it of Rod Laver, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think that wasn't too bad. And I think the whole thing was rather sweet and ingenious of him, actually. So, for my part, Mr. G, you are totally forgiven.
Even with the flying bits of ceramic going to all corners. Look out, it's Mother Superior.
Well, you could have had it restrung. That's a very good point. But they wouldn't have been Rod's strings, would they? They would have been somebody else's strings, so it would have perhaps devalued it. Do you think it was one of those old wooden tennis rackets?
Almost certainly it was a wooden tennis racket.
So very sturdy old things, I thought. I think I had one years ago.
Are we off on a reminiscence somewhere?
Yes, I remember my dad and I playing. My dad was a very good tennis player. Anyway, I digress.
You did.
I'm just going to say, I think we all did things as kids that we then try to cover up so our parents wouldn't find us out. And I think the fact is that, your dad, well, he could probably have afforded a new one. And I'm amazed that when he went out to play and all the strings broke, I thought whenever anybody played tennis, you always took a spare one on with you.
Yes, I think you do that now.
Yeah, well, maybe you didn't then, but you're forgiven.
But I think a badminton racket is quite a fun idea. What's the matter?
Mr. G's dad strikes me as rather odd. First of all, he talks like he's out of an Ealing comedy of, I say, son, go and fetch me my racket from my garage. Like they all spoke like that back in the day, did they? And here's the other thing I don't understand, is that why he thought that it was the moths that were getting at his racket. He doesn't... I'm going to posit the idea that perhaps Mr. G's dad is a bit thick. Number one, he didn't realise that perhaps the reason why the plate's missing from the mantelpiece is that it's broken and it hasn't just disappeared into a different dimension. And the other being that, bluntly, moths don't eat tennis rackets.
No, they don't.
So I'm going to say...
Yes, catgut, no.
No, they don't. So I'm going to say forgiven, because your dad's a bit thick.
I'll have you know, Mother Superior, I ran for my school and I ran for my county. You just basically said, I run like a woman. That's basically
and
what you
gave
just
you a
did.
small demonstration.
Yes.
I think I can just see you running with your arms flailing. The thing is, Simon,
Here's my prediction. If the four of us had a sprint, I would win.
Oh, yes, here we go.
Once my stomach condition is cleared.
When's that going to happen then? Ever?
next December, no doubt.
No, my GP
Throwing
said...
down the gauntlet.
Yes, absolutely.
I
And once
think.
my stomach condition is cleared...
Sort it out. Get us on the track.
100 metres. There's one up at the park, just up the road.
Done.
We'll be there. We could film it for the website and everyone would go, that's quite good. I'm just practising my excuses, though, for the sports day on Thursday. But
yeah. What, for you? Are you in the parents' race?
Yeah, I'm not going to do that, because some parents are really young. They're like 30.
Yeah.
That's no good.
Oh, well, what are you, a man or a mouse?
A mouse? I'm not running against 30-year-olds. How old are you, Matt?
cheese.
40.
There you go. I'll run again. How old are you, Rebecca?
Older than that.
OK, fine.
Don't even bother asking, OK?
34.
Stop right there. Thank you.
Could be quite fun. Anyway, OK, here's tonight's confession, and it comes from Jilly's friend. Hello, Jilly's friend. Dear everyone involved in the tawdry business of forgiveness, I heard your Duran Duran confession, and it instantly took me back to Newton Abbot in about 1980 something or other. My best friend Jilly and I really loved the coolest band in the world, the best looking, the swoon-inducing Depeche Mode. Even now I get a small thrill writing their name, and writing Dave Garn is still a passport to heavenly bliss. You see, me and my friend Jilly were, and it seems still are, quite smitten. This is about your era, isn't it, Sister Rebecca?
Yeah, a couple of years earlier. Mine was 82.
You'd moved on a bit. We had posters, photos, annuals, T-shirts, singles, albums and cassettes. We would constantly spend time in each other's bedrooms dreaming of our inevitable dates with Dave. We'd take Martin Gore or Andy Fletcher if we had to, but it was Dave we fancied more than anything. We'd record Top of the Pops with our cassette recorders when they were on, and bitterly detest all the girls who stood near the stage within touching distance. We became proper vixens. We'd slag them off and call them all sorts of names. We couldn't believe they just jigged about instead of dancing wildly and passionately when the boys began to play. In the meantime, we would dress like Depeche Mode, we'd talk like them, and we had our hair like them. I hope this isn't sounding too creepy, says Jilly's friend. Well, I think it's... You're just a fan, Jilly's friend, that's all. And then, one day, one wondrous day, Jilly got tickets to Top of the Pops. Yes, actual tickets. All we had to do was skive off school and present ourselves at the BBC for the recording of our favourite show. The boys had People Are People out, but we didn't get our hopes up. Just being in the same studio that had been graced by Dave and company was enough. Maybe we'd see Peter Powell or Mike Reid. We were hysterical and unbearable, but we were going to Top of the Pops. So with our hair perfect and ripped jeans just about decent, though Jilly was stretching things a bit, we arrived on the Wednesday afternoon and joined the queue outside Television Centre. We were ushered on and herded around by a bloke with a headset on his head as cameras whizzed about and we were warned about getting in the way. We clapped and cheered loudly at everything so that the cameras might notice us. To this end, Jilly actually ripped another hole in her jeans, and she was noticed. Another man with headphones on asked her to dance on a podium. This was... they did that in the 80s. With some other girls, but not me. I was about to fall out with Jilly when she jumped off and said that the other girls were Thompson Twins fans, and we hated the horrible Thompson Twins. Sorry, Thompson Twins. So our presenter was announced as the hairy cornflake DLT himself, and off we went. We had a fantastic time waving at Phil Fearon and Galaxy and clapping along to Captain Sensible. But we were crushed as there was sadly no appearance of the mighty Mode. We just had the video to dance to, which we'd done many times at home. Pretty brassed off, we came to the reason that I have written this tale. The last act was Shakin' Stevens. He was there in the flesh, and it seemed to us that he was there instead of Depeche Mode. Shaky fans had the real thing, we only had the video. So as he stood waiting to mime and shake, he waved to us, expecting a cheery wave back. What he got, I'm afraid to say, was a Churchillian salute from the Chilly's fingers, and me shouting, "You're useless, you are." I know it sounds terrible. He looked pretty crestfallen too. He did his number and then left. The song, I forget what it was, dropped down the chart after that. It might be my fault, me and Jilly anyway. So I need forgiveness for being rude to a denim-clad pop star whose only crime was really not being Depeche Mode. Sorry, Shaky, Jilly's friend. You can understand the kind of enormous disappointment. You get the tickets for Top of the Pops, the band that you love more than anything else. They could have been on, they had the single out, and they just got the video, which was probably on for about 1:30, which is what they normally did. Because, you see, it could use the video as a buffer to make things longer or shorter.
You know that, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you did that.
I wasn't doing it at this time, though, however. So it wasn't me. It was the hairy cornflake. So,
I love this confession.
Favourite.
It brings me back to the days. I remember trying to record Bright Eyes on a cassette recorder from the TV, and it was just the worst version of Bright Eyes you've ever heard. I just don't know why I bothered. But was it Art Garfunkel doing it, but it was just lots of people walking in and saying, all right, Rebecca, exactly.
how are you doing? Have some
terrible,
Pinot Grigio.
Terrible. And all that stuff about dressing like, like your idols. I used to do that. I used to dress like Nick Hayward.
You still do?
Do I? Okay, well, occasionally I do. Anyway, back to the confession. I don't think it was Shaky's fault. It wasn't Shaky's fault, for goodness sake. He got the brunt of their anger. And surely you know when you've got tickets to Top of the Pops whether or not they're going to be playing live or whether it's going to be a video.
No, it's just announced when you get there.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I don't think they should have taken it out on Shakin' Stevens. So for that reason...
You're useless, you are!
Sorry, Gilly's friend. You're not forgiven.
So it's the Churchillian salute from Gilly's friend.
It's a good job we're not on webcam here, Mr. Mayo. You're doing the Churchillian
acting it
salute.
out.
Yes,
for the slow-witted.
Thing is, I cannot forgive these. What was the name of our lovely lady?
Gilly's friend.
Gilly's friend. I cannot forgive any of you on the grounds of taste alone. Really, I mean, Depeche Mode must have been very nice boys at some point.
They were good.
Well, it's every man to his own, or woman in my case. Fancy not liking the Thompson Twins. What's wrong with them? Thompson Twins versus Depeche Mode. It's got to be the Thompson Twins every time.
I think that if you compared them hit for hit, No,
I'm just comparing it on musical ability, really. So I would, I
have to tell you, Depeche Mode have a legion of very, very committed fans.
Well, I'd like to, I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologise. It's not my kind of thing. So anyway, I can't possibly forgive you on the grounds of taste. The fact that Shaky was there and not Depeche Mode is irrelevant to me. You're not forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
I am going to blame Shakin' Stevens. What did he think he was doing by waving to two girls who were dressed up like Depeche Mode fans and thinking that was going to be all right? Thinking that they were going to go, oh, hi, Shaky, yes, we're big fans of yours as well. Not a lot of crossover in the Shaky versus Depeche Mode fan, as we've just found out. Not a lot of Shaky fans who are big Depeche Mode fans and vice versa. So I'm going to say you are definitely forgiven because, frankly, that Shaky knew what he was doing and got what he was expecting. So you're forgiven.
Okay, people's verdict, please. 88291. I think we might get some Depeche Mode Thompson Twins Top of the Pops based confessions.
Oh yes, please.
That might be quite fun.
And Mr. S. Mayo would be good.
It's confessions at bbc.co.uk, or you can go by the website. Thank you very much. Tonight's tale comes from Mrs. H. Thank you, Mrs. H, for tonight's tale. Father Simon and the Gather Collective, I've been trying to bring myself to write this confession for a while, but today I finally found the courage to put finger to keyboard and confess all. Before I start, I must warn you, this confession includes a dog, white jeans, a boy next door, and 3 small children. Mother Superior has white jeans on today just to reenact this.
I might have to do some acting, yes, but there's no dog, is there?
This would be a great idea. We could get you to act out the different roles in a confession as we go through it.
We could do.
That'd be quite good.
What size were hers, I wonder?
We'll put it on the webcam. About 20 years ago, I worked at a local supermarket in Bristol, the green one, as a Saturday girl. I was saving furiously for university and supplemented my wage by weekend babysitting. The family I babysat for were lovely. 3 girls, aged 10, 8 and 6. The only drawback was the slightly excitable Jack Russell called Patch, who was in truth more of a challenge than the 3 girls put together. I had sat for them a few times and the routine was simple. I was left with the password to the satellite TV, enough fizzy pop and chocolate to sustain a trip up Everest, and instructions to get the girls to bed at a decent time. This particular family also had the added bonus of living next door to the most gorgeous boy I've ever seen. We'll call him Lee. Lee was a couple of years older than me. Sorry, I sounded too excited there. Carried away. Lee was a couple of years older than me and worked for his dad's building company. He was tall, dark and brooding, and I knew I would never have the courage to actually speak to him, let alone ask him out. This one particular night, my instructions were slightly different. Instead of just letting the dog out every now and then and waiting by the door to call him back, I was to put Patch on the lead and accompany him into the garden to do his business. This was the year of the particularly bad hurricane, and the family's fence had taken a bashing and blown down. Patch would undoubtedly escape if left to his own devices, so having put the 2 youngest girls to bed, I decided now was my chance to go into the garden, see if I could sneak a peek at Lee, next door, being brooding. Won't be long, I shouted as I stepped out into the darkness. It was a cold night and I was regretting my outfit of white jeans and floaty, flowery blouse. It was my best pulling outfit. Well, you never know, says Mrs. H. She's obviously not Mrs. H at the time. She was a Ms. H. Something like that. As I tugged the dog around the darkness, I could barely make out the shape of the garden, but noticed that if I stood at the far left of the garden, climbed on a terracotta pot and leant over just a little and craned my neck, I'd just be able to see into the neighbour's lounge and the object of my desire. That's it, I thought. That's my chance. I would get to see Lee without blushing or stammering. He might be preening himself or getting ready to go out, you know, or he might be doing exercises.
Or he might be doing something else.
But no, I was getting carried away. Typing this now, it does sound a bit stalkerish, says Mrs. H, but at the time, it just felt like a golden opportunity. Patch, however, was resisting his walk around the garden. Come on, I whispered, annoyed that Patch wouldn't budge an inch. I tried again, but still Patch wouldn't move towards my vantage point, a dark patch of grass with a terracotta pot nearby, which would offer the best view of Lee and his preening. I was getting desperate and cold, and finally, with a yank of his lead, I lurched Patch forward and we stepped onto the patch of grass. Except that it wasn't a patch of grass. With a splash, I realised it was an ornamental pond, and Patch and I were now knee-deep in said ornamental pond. I've never seen Patch move so quickly. I dragged myself out with half of the pond weed and stood there dripping. What was I to do? The dog was filthy, my white jeans were ruined, and we both smelt pretty pondy. I would never be babysitting here again. It was then that I had a brainwave. I know, I'll blame the dog. I'll blame Patch. I walked into the lounge with a cry of, "That flipping dog!" I began to explain to the eldest daughter what had happened. Patch had seen something in the dark and ran at lightning speed into the pond, dragging me with him, and I was furious. Patch had ruined my jeans and my chances. When the parents arrived home a couple of hours later, they were met with the sorry sight of me in the wife's tracksuit pants, Patch's slimy pond mess spread over the whole carpet in neat paw-shaped patterns, while the dog itself was condemned to the utility room, still covered in green slime, and my once white jeans in a bag on the floor. I was still pretending to be mad. However, I don't seek forgiveness from Lee, the boy next door, for what now amounts to stalking, nor from Patch for dragging him into a pond and blaming him for my stupidity. Father Simon, I ask forgiveness from the children's parents, who not only gave me extra money that week, but actually bought me a new pair of designer jeans and presented me with a very generous cheque when I left for university a few months later as a sort of compensation for my trauma, because it was such a trauma. I've lived with this guilt for too long, and despite putting the cheque to good use, well, it was Freshers' Week, I have always felt a huge weight on my shoulders. Please find it in your hearts to forgive. By the way, I'm married now and never knew what became of lovely Lee, and she puts a little sad face at the end. So, Mrs. H, so it's good to know everything's turned out very well, even though she's still, in her heart, wants to know what happened to Lee, who was preening himself next door. Anyway, so basically, she lied, she got jeans, she got money, she got a very generous sort of compensation from neighbours who she defrauded. Maybe she's one of those Barclays bankers. She could be.
Very unlikely.
Do you think?
Well, I don't know. Maybe she is. I think the parents were amazingly kind, weren't they?
Absolutely.
To buy her designer jeans. So I think she actually came out smelling of roses, in a way.
Or the pond.
Or the pond, and roses. I think the blaming the dog was a pretty clever, ingenious way of getting out of it. I don't have a problem with blaming animals for things like that.
You're as bad as Matt. You've got the morals of a sewer.
No, really. I mean, they're not going to know any different. OK, he was put in the utility cupboard, but she didn't ask for Patch's forgiveness.
I bet Patch got shouted at.
I don't know. I think
it's a living, sentient being.
I think it's absolutely fine, and I think I'm kind of, envious that she had the ingenuity to come up with that. So you're completely forgiven.
Mother Superior.
Yeah, I think this is rather brilliant on every level, to be honest with you. My jeans, by the way, my white jeans are not designer jeans, so I don't know what it would be like to lose a pair of designer jeans.
You do have a floaty, flowery blouse on.
I do. In fact, I could be that person. But I think it's good on every level. I think it's good that she was trying to ogle a bloke. I think it was good that she got money for her jeans, that she got money for her first week at university. I think the people involved, the parents, I don't think they would have minded, actually, if she's used their money and she got them to dry clean her jeans and bought her a new pair. And the dog, as Rebecca said, the only punishment he got was to be stuck in a little room.
It was her fault. It was her fault.
Yes, I know.
She defrauded the parents.
She did not defraud them.
She did.
She was trying to not look silly.
She lied. She lusted and then she lied. How many sins do you need?
Sounds like my perfect evening. So, bearing all that in mind, I'm going to forgive her.
And she smelled of pond life.
You've turned into Gollum.
What do you say, brother Matt?
Well, Lee sounds like a frightful bore, doesn't he?
Yes.
Tall, dark and brooding. Get a life, son. Who cares what he's up to now?
Gorgeous.
Dear, oh dear. Preening on his sofa.
Her imagining what she might see.
Yeah, exactly. We all know a Lee, and we all know what they're doing now. Nothing. However, these parents sound very rich.
Preening people.
Yes, I've had it with the preeners. Had it with them. These parents sound very rich. Frankly, I'd have stung them for more. I mean, they were just giving out checks willy-nilly and designered. Yes, their fault entirely for having far too much money and for
having a pond.
And for having a pond as well. Who'd have thought? So I am going to forgive. Well done for getting the jeans and the cheque.
The people's verdict is in on the babysitter and the dog in the pond. There are far too many dogs getting the blame, not forgiven. Barbara in Hereford. People are outraged at you saying it's OK to blame the dog. Mrs H, so not forgiven. Sorry, but you're wrong when you say the dog doesn't know any different. The poor pooch would have been sad and confused, and Mrs H hasn't repented for that, says the mad dog, Lady Heather in Bedfordshire. Sign about the confession, nobody's considered the goldfish in the pond. She probably killed a few and traumatised the others. Did she check the pockets of her designer jeans for some poor unsuspecting goldfish who may have got lodged there? I think not. Phil from Foxearth in Suffolk.
Oh dear.
Forgiven, my little girl blamed the cat for the wet puddles on the carpet. And forgiven, says Amanda in Nottingham, parents' fault, should have mended the fence. Went way, way beyond babysitting duties, having to stand out in the cold with the dog in a flimsy, flowery blouse, says Amanda. This is from Mr. Short. Thank you, Mr. Short. Dear Father Simon, the Drive Time Confessions Collective, I have a confession which dates some decades back to when I was in my very early 20s. I used to work in what was then a very large chain of photography shops. They're not a high street brand anymore, but they can be found online and in the duty-free areas of airports. They still sell cameras, but in the old days it was a place for camera enthusiasts. This was a great place to work if you like cameras, which I did and still do, and certainly isn't because some staff would occasionally look at customers' holiday snaps looking for exotic poses. Oh no. Anyway, my confession is to do with a bogus memo that I sent to all the store's branches in the south of England. It came about because we, the store that is, were in the process of adding all sorts of non-photography related items like TVs, stereos, computers to our stock list. In time, this made the shop floor more and more cramped, and sometimes people complained, especially if they were trying to get around the shop with a pushchair. We carried some fabulous window displays at the time. I was proud of my window merchandising capabilities. But again, with the increasing volume of stock, it was getting tight for space, even for me at 5 foot 8 inches tall in my stocking feet. Anyway, I had a great idea for a bit of fun, says Mr. Short, and I could use one of our newly delivered computers with both built-in printer and word processor. This was properly high-tech at the time and was only the size of your average chest of drawers, a considerable improvement on what they used to be. In the days before emails in which this confession is set, memos went in an envelope with branch names on and were distributed in the internal post, which was collected every evening by a security firm. This does sound ancient, doesn't it? I thought I'd spread some fun by writing an internal memo from head office to all branches about the new recruitment policy, which I had just invented. The memo looked very realistic and official, having been printed on the new computer. I even made sure that no one knew where the memo came from by using new envelopes, so no one could see the previous destination crossed out. Very cunning. The memo stated that all staff recruited from now on should meet the new criteria that they must not exceed 5 foot 8 inches in height. There were many good reasons for this. 1. The counters that we all stood behind could be moved back to make more room for additional stock and customers. 2. It would be easier to work in the confines of the window when merchandising. 3. The company could have saved money by providing smaller uniforms with fewer sizes. 4, and here I quoted from Randy Newman's release at the time, Small People, I wrote, "They've got small little hands, little eyes, they walk around telling great big lies." I thought it was clearly a joke. Anyway, I put all the memos in the internal post, chuckling to myself, the way I just did, at how everyone would think what an amusing bogus memo this would be. But, chatting to other branches over the following days and weeks, dropping in a casual, "Did you see that email from head office?" it soon became apparent that some managers were taking it very seriously. Gulp. "How ridiculous," said some. "It's quite a good idea," said another. "I can see the logic." Of course, you must remember that there weren't any isms of any... This is a strange line that Mr. Short writes. There weren't any isms of any kind in those days. It certainly wasn't much of an issue where I was. Right. As an explainer. Okay. Anyway, I had a visit from the area manager a few days later, and he told me how some fool had sent out a bogus email. I'd probably had a copy, and I should ignore it, because some managers had taken the memo to heart and asked potential employees their height before the interview, and cancelled if certain criteria had not been met. Those under the new height stipulation were turned away. I'm not sure how many keen, eager and intelligent future sales staff had their careers wrecked by my jolly jape, but apparently it was between 20 and 30. Wow. Also, present members of staff under 5'8" started to get a little twitchy, wondering if they'd be the next to go. I was not a suspect in this case, and thank goodness as well that I had kept my involvement a secret. It was amusing enough for me to hear the views of fellow managers with varying degrees of gullibility. However, I do beg forgiveness from anyone who might have been denied a career in a dynamic retail company because of their height. Mind you, I still think it's a sound concept, says Mr. Short. Now, I would have thought adding some Randy Newman lyrics in there would be a bit of a giveaway, really, if a memo from head office said... They've got little hands, little eyes, they walk around telling great big lies. To me, that sounds as though you're pushing it a little bit too far. Anyway, Mr. Short, 5'8", that's it. Anyone over that, you're not getting a job at this particular retail store, which I used to work in as well.
Did you?
I had a Saturday job. Oh. Yes.
But you didn't come across this memo, or
I don't think
you weren't
so.
affected
And
by the memo?
we certainly didn't have anyone who looked at customers' holiday snaps.
I think this tale either shows that there were some very stupid people working for that company at the time, very gullible people.
That's true.
Or it shows that some people, that the managers in that company could have sent out that kind of memo. I mean, maybe they had a strange, kind of management, so it wouldn't be that surprising to receive a memo like that.
We always get rubbish from head office.
Exactly, and this is another rubbish, dictum from on high. So I think either way, it's not Mr. Short's fault. He was just trying to have a laugh. I do wonder why he had enough time on his hands to write the memo, but that's a different matter. So yeah, I think it should have just been seen as a joke by everyone, and Mr. Short, you are forgiven.
And, of course, he has got little hands and little eyes and tells great big lies. What do you say, Mother Superior?
I'm a little bit confused, actually.
Yes, but what do you think about the confession?
Can you just re-explain to me? Because it wasn't that I drifted off or anything,
no.
Although I am having a very busy day on the roads. But why? What was the 5'8" thing all about? Because there was too much stuff and they couldn't reach it to replace it. Is that what that was all about?
It's his height, and he thinks that it would be just a jolly jape and there'd be more room for window dressing and other items.
So there wasn't a particular issue, was there? He just thought it would be funny to say anybody over this height wouldn't be acceptable. Yes. Well, I think that's really silly. Really silly. And I don't even think it's very funny, honestly. And it put a lot... I think
Anything else wrong with it?
Well, I think it shows that the managers at the time, I think it's quite a nice thing that they were all quite concerned about it. I'm not sure that they did actually not employ people over that height.
Between 20 and 30
Yeah,
people.
I don't know if that's true, but anyway...
you just choose to ignore that.
Yeah, I do, really, because I can't think of anybody with any sense would do that.
But that's the whole point. They did take it seriously, and they asked potential employees their height before the interview, and if they were the wrong height, they didn't get...
I don't know that I believe that. That's all I'm saying. So I just don't know. You see, bearing in mind that I think it's a bit of a daft thing, I'm going to say I do forgive you. Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Mr. Short, having been completely rubbish there. Yes, what do you think?
What I love about this is that there's a regional manager somewhere who got this memo, who was reading all the way down, then gets to the Randy Newman lyrics and goes, yeah, they are, and they do tell lies, don't they? Yes.
There was just that short guy the other day.
Yes.
Look at the lies he was telling.
Yes, absolutely. So therefore, I am not going to employ any more of that particular height. So, I mean, to be honest, there's no accounting for your manager being thick. So I'm going to forgive, because clearly these managers were just a bit thick or prejudiced against people of a certain height.
Do you think that's right?
Yeah, let's say it. Yeah, I said it.
You come out and say it like it is.
I said it.
Well, that's it. There's another one available next Friday. Don't forget, you can get the Daily Mayo Monday to Thursday. It's quite good occasionally. See what you make of it. The best bits of every day. It's the Daily Mayo. Thank you very much indeed. More soon.